In the lightless depths of the abyss, where sanity itself becomes a distant memory and the laws of reality bend and shatter, there dwells a horror so ancient and terrible that even other demon lords speak its name with grudging fear. The Demogorgon, the prince of demons, the sibilant beast, the master of the spiraling depths, stands as perhaps the most iconic and terrifying entity in the endless hierarchies of the lower planes. The first thing that strikes those unfortunate enough to witness the Demogorgon is its utterly alien form. Rising 18 feet tall, the Prince of Demons possesses a body that seems designed by madness itself. The creature's torso resembles that of a great ape, powerful and muscular, yet possessing an unnatural flexibility like that of a serpent. Its lower body is decidedly reptilian, with massive saurian legs ending in clawed feet capable of crushing stone, and a thick, forked tail that can batter down fortifications or drain the life force from any creature it strikes. But it is the heads that truly define this abomination. Two serpentine necks emerge from massive shoulders, each crowned with a head resembling those of mandrills or baboons. Simian visages with elongated snouts, cruel fangs, and eyes that burn with predatory intelligence and bottomless hunger. These are not just appendages, but separate consciousness, each with its own name and personality. The left head is called Aameul, the more calculating and charismatic of the pair, relishing deception and long-term schemes. The right head bears the name Hethradiah, an impulsive and savage consciousness that revels in immediate violence and destruction. And then there are the arms, or rather what should be arms. Instead of limbs, two massive tentacles writhe from the creature's shoulders, each appendage capable of crushing armor, rending flesh, or worse, rotting away whatever they touch with their corrosive secretions. These tentacles possess an unholy ability to drain the very essence of life from those they grasp, transferring vitality directly to their master. The entire form seems to shift and waver when observed directly, as if the Demogorgon exists partially outside the boundaries of normal perception. To look upon the Prince of Demons is to feel one's mind begin to unravel, to hear whispers in languages that predate thought itself, to glimpse impossible geometries that should not exist. Many who have survived encounters with the Demogorgon, and survivors are vanishingly rare, spend the remainder of their days in asylums, their minds shattered beyond all hope of repair. The true origins of the Demogorgon remain shrouded in mystery and contradiction, with multiple legends competing to explain how such a monstrosity came to be. Unlike many entities in the multiverse whose beginnings are clearly documented, the Prince of Demons' genesis is subject to debate even among the most learned scholars of planar lore. What makes this uncertainty particularly noteworthy is that both major origin stories come from authoritative sources within the lore of the Abyss itself, suggesting that perhaps both contain elements of truth, or that the nature of the Abyss itself defies simple linear understanding of time and causality. The first and perhaps most widely accepted origin story claims the Demogorgon was the very first Tanar'ri demon ever created. In the primordial age before the current order of demons, the Abyss was ruled by beings called Obriths, alien, incomprehensible entities that predated the gods themselves. These creatures were even more bizarre and terrible than modern demons, their forms and minds so fundamentally wrong that mortal perception could barely process their existence. The greatest of the Obrith lords was the Queen of Chaos, an entity of such power and malevolence that her very name inspired terror throughout the planes. She discovered that the souls of chaotic evil mortals, when they entered the Abyss, could be shaped and transformed into a new type of demon, creatures more cunning and dangerous than the mindless chaos of the Obriths. She began experimenting with these mortal souls, using powerful servitors called Cybrexes to craft them into Tanar'ri. According to this legend, Demogorgon was her very first creation, formed from the consolidated primal fears of mortal souls, but something went wrong, or perhaps too right. The creature that emerged was twisted and deformed, with boneless tentacles for arms and two heads that constantly fought with each other. The Queen of Chaos deemed him a failure, an abortion of evil that did not meet her standards, and cast him aside into the forgotten depths of the abyss. There, in exile and isolation, Demogorgon festered and grew strong, while the Queen of Chaos perfected her techniques and created more refined demons, including eventually Orcus and other demon lords. Demogorgon remained hidden, nurturing his power and his resentment. He watched from the shadows as the Queen raised up Miska the Wolf Spider to be her champion and general, bestowed upon him the title of Prince of Demons after she murdered the previous holder of that title, the Obrith Lord Abyssal. The Queen of Chaos launched a massive war to conquer the multiverse, her forces of Obriths and Tenari sweeping across the plains, but her ambitions were checked by the Wind Dukes of Aqua, powerful beings of elemental law who opposed her chaos. In a climactic battle, Miska was imprisoned in the legendary Rod of Seven Parts, and the Queen of Chaos was driven back and defeated. This created a power vacuum in the Abyss. With both Miska and the Queen of Chaos out of the picture, Demon Lords Orcus and Gratz immediately began warring with each other for the right to claim the title of Prince of Demons. The entire Abyss watched the struggle, certain that one of these two powerful lords would emerge victorious. That's when Demogorgon struck. Having grown immensely powerful during his long exile, the forgotten First Tenari emerged from the depths in a rampage of destruction. He launched a massive assault across the Abyss, crushing the forces of his rivals, and slaying a dozen demon lords in brutal combat, draining their life essences with his tentacles and adding their power to his own. His fury and might were so overwhelming that even Orcus and Gratz were forced to bend the knee and acknowledge him as the Prince of Demons. The second origin story, equally well attested in certain sources, paints an entirely different picture. According to this legend, Demogorgon was not originally a demon at all, but rather a primordial, one of the ancient elemental beings that existed before the gods and helped shape the fundamental forces of the cosmos. In this version, Demogorgon was the very first primordial to set foot in the Abyss shortly after the formation of that infinite plane. He was followed closely by Dagon, another aquatic primordial of immense power, and the two engaged in a titanic struggle for control of the realm. Their battle shook the foundations of the nascent Abyss, reshaping entire layers with the force of their conflict. But while Demogorgon and Dagon fought, the Obrith Lord of Abyssal seized the opportunity to claim the Abyss for himself, declaring himself the first Prince of Demons. Faced with this new threat, an uneasy alliance was formed between Demogorgon, Orcus, and Bahamut to defeat Abyssal and drive him from power. It was during these ancient conflicts that Demogorgon gained his distinctive dual-headed nature. According to this legend, he originally possessed a single head until a blow from the primordial Amoth split it cleanly in two. Rather than dying from the wound, Demogorgon survived, and each half of his head developed into a separate conscious entity, thus creating Aameul and Hethradiah. Soon after the transformation, Demogorgon defeated another primordial named Storok, a being of living stone. But rather than simply destroying his enemy, Demogorgon devised a more cruel fate. He imprisoned Storok beneath his throne and performed a dark ritual that linked the primordial to the entire race of Ettins, two-headed giants. Through this connection, every time an Ettin anywhere in the multiverse experiences pain, that agony is transferred directly to Storok, ensuring the primordial suffers eternal torment. Following these events, the Queen of Chaos and her champion Miska were eventually defeated by the combined forces of law. This led to the same power struggle between Orcus and Gratz, and once again Demogorgon emerged from wherever he had been to claim the title of Prince of Demons through sheer, overwhelming force. Both versions of Demogorgon's origin share certain key elements: his immense age, his eventual triumph over Orcus and Gratz to claim the title of Prince of Demons, and his status as one of the most ancient and powerful beings in the Abyss. Both accounts also explain the presence of Abyssal, the Obrith who preceded Demogorgon as Prince of Demons and who still plots to reclaim that title. Some scholars suggest that both stories may be true in their own way, that perhaps Demogorgon was indeed a primordial who descended into the Abyss, where his essence was transformed by the plane's corrupting influence and merged with the primal fears of mortal souls, creating something that was neither purely primordial nor purely demonic, but a horrifying synthesis of both. Others propose that the contradictions themselves are significant, that the nature of the abyss makes linear causality meaningless, and that Demogorgon's dual origin somehow reflects his dual nature, just as Aameul and Hethradiah exist simultaneously as both separate entities and parts of a unified whole. Perhaps both origin stories are simultaneously true and false. What remains indisputable is that Demogorgon has held the title of Prince of Demons for countless eons, that he was the third to claim this title after Abyssal and Miska the Wolf Spider, and that despite constant challenges from other demon lords, none have proven strong enough to take it from him. Demogorgon rules from the 88th layer of the Abyss, a realm known as the Gaping Maw, sometimes also called the Brine Flats. The layer perfectly reflects its master's dual nature and serves as both his fortress and his laboratory, a place where reality itself seems infected by his madness. The realm consists of two primary environments that exist in uneasy balance. The first is a vast primordial jungle that covers enormous land masses, a steaming ancient wilderness filled with dangers both natural and supernatural. This jungle, sometimes called the Screaming Jungle, is populated by troglodytes who worship Demogorgon as Amon-Ibor, the sibilant beast, savage lizard folk tribes, Hezru demons, Wan-Ti who know him as Sioviash, demonic dinosaurs, dire apes, and Baralgurus. The vegetation itself seems twisted and wrong, with plants that move with disturbing purpose and emit sounds that drive visitors to madness. The second environment is an endless ocean of briny water beneath a sky of perpetual yellow mist and roiling storm clouds. This is no ordinary sea. The water is turbid and thick, tasting of salt and corruption, and is broken by countless rocky promontories that jut from the depths like teeth of some impossibly vast monster. These sharp, ugly stone formations rise straight from the water, many topped with twin rookeries or structures that mirror Demogorgon's own palace in miniature. At the edge of the jungle where it meets the briny ocean lie the Brine Flats, extensive swamps that serve as a transitional zone between land and sea. Here, in these fetid marshes, Demogorgon maintains a fortress called Ungorth-Reddick, a massive stronghold housing his armies of Hezrus, Aboleths, Scrags, Scum, and various ichthyloid creatures. The fortress is guarded by unusual retrievers, golems, and other evil constructs that Demogorgon has created or corrupted for his purposes. Also at the jungle's edge stands Lemoriax, the layer's only significant city and one of the most notorious locations in the entire Abyss. The crumbling metropolis is dotted with ancient ziggurats and step pyramids, home to tens of thousands of savage demons who engage in constant warfare and ritual sacrifice. Lemoriax serves as one of the multiverse's premier slave markets, where beings from across the planes are bought and sold. Demogorgon himself occasionally climbs to the top of the tallest pyramid to bellow blasphemous proclamations that echo across his realm. But the true heart of the Gaping Maw lies in the ocean, approximately 100 miles from the shores of Lemoriax. There, rising from the depths, stands Abysm, Demogorgon's palace and the seat of his power. Abysm is an architectural impossibility, a structure that seems to defy both physics and sanity. It consists of two serpentine towers, each shaped roughly like a tightly coiled snake, their surfaces covered with sharp fin-like projections, spines, and other cruel features. The towers are crowned at the peaks with enormous minarets shaped like screaming skulls, one for each of Demogorgon's heads. Near the top, a bridge connects the two towers, though few have ever crossed it and lived to tell the tale. One of the most interesting things about Abysm is its vertical extent. The towers extend not just upward, but also impossibly far downward, plunging deep beneath the ocean floor. The underwater portions form a vast labyrinth of dark, cold caverns and passages that spiral down and down through the bedrock of the layer. The architecture is twisted and non-Euclidean, with staircases that loop back on themselves, corridors that should be parallel but somehow intersect, and rooms whose dimensions shift depending on the observer's mental state. The reefs and caverns surrounding Abysm are home to some of Demogorgon's most faithful servants. Aboleth, ancient fish-like creatures of terrible intelligence, lurk in the depths, constantly plotting and scheming. Kraken of immense size prowl the waters, their tentacles capable of dragging entire ships into the depths. Most importantly, the ixitxachitl, intelligent, evil manta rays who serve as Demogorgon's chosen race, patrol the waters in vast schools, their very presence poisoning the sea with malevolence. These three factions constantly war with each other even as they worship Demogorgon above in his palace, their conflicts providing entertainment for their master. The towers of Abysm extend so deep that they actually connect to the layer beneath the Gaping Maw, the Shadow Sea, the 89th layer of the Abyss, which is ruled by the Lorelord Dagon. Through these connections, Dagon visits Demogorgon, advising each of his heads separately and playing a dangerous game of manipulation that has somehow maintained their alliance for eons. The environment within Abysm itself is perhaps even more dangerous than the creatures that inhabit it. The maddening presence of Demogorgon infuses the structure with powerful latent magical effects. Some manifest spontaneously. Hallways might suddenly fill with magical darkness, or illusory copies of Demogorgon might appear to terrify and confuse intruders. Lizards, snakes, and other poisonous creatures spontaneously generate in the corridors. The very stones seem to whisper secrets that no mortal mind should comprehend. Beasts that enter the fortress are driven aggressive and insane, attacking anything they encounter with suicidal fury. Humanoids who linger too long in Abysm find their thoughts become increasingly disordered, their perceptions warping, their memories fragmenting. Many who have entered seeking to confront Demogorgon have instead become lost in the twisting passages, eventually succumbing to madness and becoming permanent residents of the palace, mindless servants of its master. The dual nature of the Gaping Maw, split between savage jungle and corrupted ocean, reflects the dual nature of its ruler. Just as Aameul and Hethradiah constantly struggle for dominance while remaining inseparable, the land and sea of the layer exist in perpetual tension, neither able to overcome the other. This balance of opposites and conflict is the defining characteristic of Demogorgon's realm, and perhaps of the Prince of Demons himself. No discussion of the Demogorgon would be complete without addressing his complex web of alliances, rivalries, and enmities that define the political landscape of the Abyss. As Prince of Demons, Demogorgon stands at the center of countless schemes, betrayals, and power struggles that have shaped the demonic hierarchy for eons. Chief among Demogorgon's rivals is Orcus, the demon prince of undeath. Their hatred for each other is legendary throughout the planes, an animosity so deep and fundamental that it transcends mere competition for power. Where Demogorgon represents madness, chaos, and the corruption of the living mind, Orcus embodies death, undeath, and the perversion of mortality itself. They are opposites in many ways, yet similar in their ambition and cruelty. The rivalry between these two demon lords has raged since the earliest days of the Abyss. When the Queen of Chaos fell and the title of Prince of Demons became vacant, both Orcus and Gratz competed for the honor. Neither expected the emergence of Demogorgon, and Orcus has never forgiven being forced to bow before the forgotten First Tenari. Since that humiliation, he has constantly schemed to overthrow Demogorgon and claim the title for himself. Their war manifests in countless ways across the multiverse. Their respective cults clash whenever they meet, engaging in bloody conflicts that leave entire regions devastated. Their servants and armies battle across multiple layers of the Abyss, with territory constantly changing hands. Mortal worlds are used as proxies for their struggle, with each demon lord working to corrupt kingdoms and empires to serve as a weapon against the other. Yet for all this conflict, neither has managed to gain permanent advantage. They are too evenly matched in power and cunning. Demogorgon possesses superior raw strength and the advantage of his position as Prince of Demons, but Orcus commands legions of undead that cannot be driven mad or corrupted. When they have met in direct combat, rare occasions that are remembered as cataclysmic events in abyssal history, neither has been able to destroy the other. Gratz, the Dark Prince and Demon Lord of Pleasure and Decadence, represents another significant threat to Demogorgon's position. Unlike Orcus, whose approach is typically direct and brutal, Gratz operates through seduction, manipulation, and complex schemes. He is perhaps the most civilized and charming of all demon lords, which makes him no less dangerous, merely dangerous in different ways. Gratz also competed for the title of Prince of Demons in those ancient days and was also forced to kneel before Demogorgon. He has never forgotten this humiliation, and his plots against Demogorgon are Byzantine in their complexity, often taking decades or centuries to come to fruition. The Dark Prince has attempted multiple times to forge alliances against Demogorgon, though his own duplicitous nature makes maintaining such alliances difficult. Aameul, the Demon Prince of Deception, is another dedicated enemy. Demogorgon has attempted to conquer his realm on several occasions, and Aameul responds with elaborate schemes designed to undermine Demogorgon's power and influence. Their conflict is particularly insidious, as Aameul excels at manipulation and illusion, constantly working to turn Aameul and Hethradiah against each other, more than they already are. Perhaps the enemy Demogorgon truly fears, if such a being can be said to fear anything, is Abyssal, the original Prince of Demons. This ancient Abyssal lord precedes both Miska and Demogorgon in holding that title, and according to some accounts, Demogorgon was part of the alliance that overthrew him. Abyssal has vowed to murder Demogorgon and reclaim his title, and unlike Orcus and Gratz, Abyssal's hatred is patient and absolute. The Abyssal Lord has made multiple attempts to destroy Demogorgon over the ages, each more elaborate and dangerous than the last. He possesses knowledge and power that predate the gods themselves, and his very existence represents a threat not just to Demogorgon but to the entire order of modern demons. If Abyssal were to succeed in reclaiming the title of Prince of Demons, it would likely trigger a fundamental reshaping of the Abyss itself. Despite his many enemies, Demogorgon is not without allies, though the term must be used loosely when discussing demons. His most significant alliance is with Dagon, the Abyssal Lord of the Shadow Sea. Dagon serves as a trusted advisor to Demogorgon, though the relationship is complex and perhaps not entirely honest on either side. What's interesting about Dagon's position is that he advises both Aameul and Hethradiah separately, telling each head what it wants to hear and subtly encouraging their conflict. This has led some scholars to speculate that Dagon is manipulating Demogorgon, keeping him divided against himself to prevent the Prince of Demons from becoming too powerful, or perhaps positioning himself to take advantage if Demogorgon ever falls. Yet Dagon has had opportunities to betray Demogorgon and has not taken them, suggesting either genuine loyalty or a scheme so long-term that its endpoint remains obscure. Demogorgon maintains an alliance with ixitxachitl, the demon lord of the Barguras, which are demonic apes. ixitxachitl guards the landward reproaches to the Gaping Maw and once helped Demogorgon invade the Olympian glades of Arborea, though the relationship has been strained of late. The Prince of Demons has also occasionally worked with Zugmoy, the demon queen of fungi, exchanging various biological materials and engaging in discussions about their respective experiments. Demogorgon has had romantic relationships, if that term can be applied to demons, with several powerful female demons, though they have inevitably ended badly. He was romantically involved with Malkanthet, the succubus queen and demon princess of lust, but she readily manipulated him for her own advancement and would betray him without hesitation if it served her purposes. More significantly, he had a relationship with Shami Amore, another powerful succubus demon lord. She too manipulated him, and her machinations eventually led to her imprisonment in the Wells of Darkness. Demogorgon's inability to maintain functional relationships, even by the low standards of demon lords, speaks to the way his dual nature undermines even his personal connections. Demogorgon has made enemies beyond the demon lords. He hates Sakola, the god of the Sahagin, which are shark-like humanoids, and encourages his ixitxachitl followers to hunt and kill Sahagin wherever they encounter them. He has also clashed with Charon, the ferryman of the river Styx, and with Gwenharwif of the Ladrin court of stars. He has enslaved Azuvadexis, who was once a demon lord in his own right, ruling over primeval beasts and scaled nightmares. The humiliation of this former peer now serving as a slave demonstrates Demogorgon's cruelty and his willingness to completely destroy any demon lord who opposes him unsuccessfully. The constant warfare and scheming among demon lords creates opportunities for others. Devils from the Nine Hells carefully monitor and sometimes encourage conflicts between demon lords, as their struggles weaken the Abyss as a whole in the eternal blood war between devils and demons. Mortal cultists of one demon lord often receive covert support from other demon lords who see an opportunity to undermine their rivals. Even celestial beings and forces of law occasionally work to fan the flames of demonic rivalry, knowing that demons fighting each other are not threatening the rest of the multiverse. For adventurers and heroes, the rivalries between demon lords can provide both opportunity and danger. Playing demon lords against each other can be a very effective strategy for undermining cults or preventing demonic incursions. However, such manipulations are extraordinarily dangerous, as even the weakest demon lord is vastly more powerful and cunning than most mortals can comprehend. In the material plane and beyond, the Demogorgon is worshipped by those who have surrendered to madness or who seek power through the dissolution of sanity. His cults tend to form in coastal regions or places where water holds significance, near oceans, along rivers, around lakes, or in seaside caverns, though they can emerge anywhere that desperation and madness find fertile ground. These cultists often display the signs of their devotion through self-mutilation and body modification, creating two-headed symbols carved or branded into their flesh. Some even attempt to graft additional heads onto their bodies through dark magic and surgical procedures, seeking to emulate their master's dual nature. Most of these attempts fail horribly, resulting in death or permanent disfigurement, but the rare success creates twisted beings of terrible power. Temples to Demogorgon are architecturally distinctive, always split in half with one side representing Aameul and the other representing Hethradiah. The division might be a simple line down the center of a single chamber, or might manifest as two completely separate buildings connected by a narrow passage. Worshippers move between the two sides, some preferring one head's philosophy over the other, while the high priest must maintain balance between both aspects of their god. The rituals performed in these temples are bloody and chaotic affairs. Sacrifice plays a central role, with victims being killed in ways that inflict maximum suffering and terror. The blood is offered to both aspects of Demogorgon, with cultists chanting in the language of their master, a horrible combination of hisses, gurgles, and incomprehensible syllables that seem to bypass the ears and assault the mind directly. Those who hear a high priest of Demogorgon speak the true name of their god risk instant insanity. The priests themselves wield terrible power granted by their patron. They can inflict madness with a word, summon tentacles from thin air to grasp and strangle their enemies, or cause water to rise up and attack at their command. The most powerful among them can temporarily split their own consciousness into two, allowing them to pursue multiple strategies simultaneously. Though this power is dangerous and can result in permanent fragmentation of the self. Cultists of Demogorgon often engage in activities designed to spread chaos and madness throughout civilized regions. They might poison water supplies with substances that cause hallucinations and paranoia. They conduct raids to capture victims for sacrifice, preferring those who are particularly mentally stable or rational, as breaking such individuals is seen as especially pleasing to their master. They work to undermine institutions of learning and reason, burning libraries, assassinating scholars, and spreading misinformation designed to erode trust in knowledge and expertise. The cult prospers particularly in times of chaos and upheaval, when society breaks down, when war and plague ravage the land. When people feel that reason and order have failed them, that is when the whispers of Demogorgon find the most fertile soil. His cultists promise power to the powerless, revenge to the wronged, and a kind of terrible liberation from the constraints of sanity and civilization. Among the races, certain groups are particularly drawn to the Demogorgon's worship. The ixitxachitl, evil manta ray creatures, venerate him as their primary deity, drawing power from the abyss itself through their devotion. They dare not speak his name aloud, referring to him through epithets and symbols. Vampiric ixitxachitl clerics drain life energy from victims, which is transferred directly to Demogorgon through an unknown abyssal mechanism. Troglodytes know him as Aameul, the sibilant beast, and their shamans perform elaborate rituals involving the sacrifice of prisoners and the consumption of certain psychoactive fungi that grow in their caverns. The Yuan-ti call him Sio Sivash and see parallels between his dual nature and their own hybrid forms. Some Yuan-ti sects believe that achieving a perfect balance between serpent and human, like Demogorgon's balance between his two heads, is the path to ultimate power. The Kuo-Tua, the mad fish folk of the Underdark, worship him as Limugugun, the Deep Father. Their priests claim to receive visions from him in the dark waters of underground lakes, visions that drive them even further into madness and cause them to conduct bizarre rituals that make little sense even by the standards of demon worship. Evil humans and other humanoids also form significant portions of Demogorgon's cult. These are often individuals who have suffered some great trauma or loss that has fractured their minds, or who were simply born with a predisposition towards madness that Demogorgon's influence amplifies. They might be disgraced scholars who went too far in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, failed leaders who blame rationality for their downfall, or simply those who have gazed into the void and found that they preferred what they saw there to the world of light and reason. The cult is highly decentralized, with different cells often unaware of each other's existence. This makes them difficult to root out, as destroying one temple or cell does not significantly damage the cult as a whole. Communication between cells often occurs through visions, dreams, or messages written in blood and left in places sacred to Demogorgon. Some cultists believe they receive direct telepathic commands from their master, though scholars suggest these are more likely delusions or the product of residual magical influence rather than genuine divine communication. One of the most disturbing aspects is the cult's appeal to those who believe themselves rational and in control. Demogorgon's followers argue that madness is not the absence of thought, but rather a different kind of thinking, freed from the arbitrary constraints that society imposes. They claim that the dual nature of their master represents the ultimate evolution of consciousness, the ability to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously and pursue multiple goals without the weakness of unified purpose. For those who investigate or oppose the cult, the greatest danger may not be violence but corruption. Prolonged exposure to Demogorgon's influence, even secondhand through his cultists, can begin to erode one's mental defenses. Investigators find themselves plagued by nightmares, experiencing intrusive thoughts, or noticing disturbing patterns in seemingly random events. Some who set out to destroy the cult end up joining it, convinced that they have discovered a deeper truth that their former companions are too blind or cowardly to accept. Unlike many demon lords who are creatures of pure destruction operating on single principles of violence and chaos, the Demogorgon possesses a terrible intelligence that makes him far more dangerous than his appearance might suggest. His two heads may be in constant conflict with each other, but this internal struggle does not make him less formidable. Rather, it makes him unpredictable and capable of pursuing multiple strategies simultaneously, adapting to circumstances with a flexibility that unified consciousness cannot match. Aameul, the left head, tends towards cunning and long-term planning. It is the more charismatic of the pair, capable of seduction and manipulation where such approaches serve its purposes. Aameul schemes constantly, not just against external enemies but against his twin, devising elaborate plots to somehow separate from or dominate Hethradiah. It values deception and subterfuge, preferring to corrupt and control rather than simply destroy. When Demogorgon engages in diplomacy or makes deals, rare occurrences but not unknown, it is usually Aameul that handles the negotiations. Hethradiah, the right head, favors immediate violence and domination. It is impulsive and feral, reveling in destruction for its own sake. Where Aameul plots, Hethradiah strikes. Where Aameul seduces, Hethradiah terrorizes. Paradoxically, despite being more violent and aggressive of the pair, Hethradiah does not wish to be separated from its twin. It recognizes, perhaps on some instinctive level, that the union creates something greater than either could be alone. This duality creates an entity that is simultaneously calculating and impulsive, patient and impatient, subtle and brutal. Enemies never know which aspect they will face at any given moment, and strategies that might work against one head often fail spectacularly against the other. The two heads can cooperate when necessary, and when they do, combining Aameul's cunning with Hethradiah's raw aggression, they become truly unstoppable. But such cooperation is always temporary and unstable. The Demogorgon's power is legendary even among demon lords. He possesses strength that allows his tentacles to rend fortresses and his tail to shatter castle walls. His tentacles secrete a substance that rots away almost any material they touch, causing armor to dissolve, stone to crumble, and flesh to necrotize. The life-draining ability of these same appendages can reduce a powerful warrior to a withered husk in moments, with the stolen vitality flowing directly into Demogorgon's body. His tail is equally deadly, delivering devastating physical blows enhanced by necrotic energy that continues to damage victims long after the initial impact. The tail can strike with serpentine speed, making it nearly impossible to dodge even for the most agile opponents. But perhaps Demogorgon's most feared weapons are his gazes. Each head possesses a different gaze attack, reflecting its personality and powers. Hethradiah's gaze can drive creatures into states of utter confusion and madness, causing them to attack allies, flee in terror, or simply stand catatonic as their minds fracture. Aameul's gaze is even more insidious. It can implant a dual personality in victims, creating a second consciousness loyal to Demogorgon himself. This false personality lies dormant until activated, at which point it can seize control and turn the victim into an unwitting spy or assassin. His magical abilities are equally formidable. Demogorgon can cast spells with ease, including Dispel Magic to counter enemy defenses, telekinesis to hurl objects or enemies through the air, and numerous other incantations. He possesses the rare demonic ability to plane shift, allowing him to travel between layers of the abyss or even to other planes entirely, something most demons cannot do. This makes him capable of appearing almost anywhere if he so desires, though his attention is fortunately divided among countless schemes and he rarely manifests directly on the material plane. The mere presence of Demogorgon warps reality around him. His aura of madness extends for hundreds of feet, causing mental instability in anyone who comes near. Water seems to obey his will, rising up to form grasping hands or drowning those he wishes to destroy. Mutations occur spontaneously in living creatures exposed to his presence for too long. Limbs might sprout extra joints, eyes might appear in wrong places, or more dramatic transformations might take hold, gradually warping victims into monstrosities that reflect their master's twisted form. When Demogorgon is truly threatened, he can perform a devastating final action, creating a massive force wave that draws all nearby creatures into his body, consuming them utterly. Beings destroyed this way cannot be resurrected by any means. They are not merely killed but erased, their essence incorporated into Demogorgon himself. This ability ensures that even defeating him comes at a terrible cost, as he will drag his killers down with him. Demogorgon can also alter reality itself within areas under his influence, particularly locations connected to the Gaping Maw. These alterations are always demonic in nature. Laws of physics might reverse, up and down lose meaning. Time flows differently in different areas, or space folds in upon itself in non-Euclidean ways. Those who enter areas where Demogorgon has warped reality find that their compasses spin uselessly, their maps become meaningless, and their very senses cannot be trusted. Despite, or perhaps because of, his madness, Demogorgon is extraordinarily creative and relishes experimentation and innovation. His realm is littered with the results of his experiments: hybrid creatures combining multiple species, constructs animated by captured souls, cursed artifacts that spread his influence, and architectural impossibilities that serve purposes only he understands. He created the Dread Forge, a magical anvil capable of transforming dinosaurs into thinking reptilian humanoids through blood sacrifice, and has used it to create numerous other transformations and enchanted items. The Prince of Demons studies magic, biology, architecture, and numerous other disciplines with genuine intellectual curiosity, though his research always serves ultimately destructive ends. He maintains vast libraries in Abysm, containing knowledge from 1,000 worlds, though the books themselves are often bound in skin or written in blood, and reading them without proper protections risks madness. In combat, Demogorgon prefers to avoid direct engagement when possible, instead using magic and servants to wear down enemies before revealing himself. When he does enter battle personally, he fights with a combination of savage fury and tactical cunning that makes him nearly impossible to defeat. The few beings who have stood against him in single combat and survived have been legendary heroes possessing artifacts of tremendous power, divine favor, or both, and even then they typically only manage to banish rather than destroy him. Throughout history, foolish or desperate mortals have attempted to summon the Prince of Demons, believing they can bind him to their will or bargain with him for power. These attempts almost invariably end in catastrophe, yet each generation produces new would-be conjurers who believe themselves clever or strong enough to succeed where countless others have failed. The rituals required to summon even an avatar of Demogorgon are tremendously complex and dangerous. They require extensive preparation, including the gathering of rare components, the construction of elaborate circles and symbols, and most importantly, vast quantities of blood sacrifice. The minimum sacrifice for even the weakest summoning is typically measured in dozens of lives, while summoning Demogorgon's full attention requires hundreds or even thousands of deaths. The location matters as well. Summonings are most successful in the presence of water, particularly salt water from deep oceans, coastal caves where the tide rises and falls, underground grottos fed by saltwater springs, or specially constructed chambers with channels to the sea. These are the places where the barriers between planes grow thin enough for Demogorgon's power to manifest. Some cultists have attempted summonings on ships at sea, which sometimes succeed but often result in the vessel being dragged into the depths, its entire crew sacrificed to power the manifestation. The symbols must be drawn in perfect precision using specific materials. Blood mixed with rare minerals, ground bone from creatures who died in madness, and other components that vary according to different texts and traditions. A single error in the symbols can cause the ritual to fail spectacularly, often killing the summoners as the energy they've raised turns on them. Even successful symbols must be refreshed periodically during long rituals, as Demogorgon's presence causes them to decay and warp. The summoners must chant in the language of madness itself, that terrible combination of hissing, gurgling, and incomprehensible sounds that is Demogorgon's native tongue. Each syllable risks the sanity of the speaker, and the full invocation typically requires multiple chanters, speaking different parts simultaneously. Many summoning attempts fail when the chanters go mad before completing the ritual, turning on each other or simply collapsing into catatonia. If all of these requirements are met, if the sacrifice is sufficient, if the symbols are perfect, and if the summoners maintain their sanity long enough to complete the invocation, then Demogorgon's attention turns towards them. This moment, when the Prince of Demons first becomes aware of the summoning, is itself dangerous. Some summoners die instantly from the psychic shock of his notice. Others find that his very attention is enough to shatter their binding circles, as the power they've prepared to contain him proves woefully inadequate. Even if the summoning succeeds and Demogorgon manifests, whether fully or in avatar form, the summoners must then survive his presence long enough to state their purpose. Many are driven mad simply by his gaze or torn apart by his tentacles before they can speak. His first reaction to being summoned is typically rage at the presumption, and he must be convinced. Through words, through magical compulsions, or through demonstrations of power, not to simply destroy those who dared to call him forth. Those who do manage to negotiate with Demogorgon discover that any deal struck with the Prince of Demons contains hidden clauses and loopholes that inevitably work to his advantage. He might grant power as requested, but twist the form it takes. He might provide information, but ensure that using it serves his greater purposes. He might agree to help with the problem, but solve it in ways that create even worse difficulties. Some summoners attempt to bind Demogorgon rather than bargain with him, using powerful constraining magic to force his obedience. This is perhaps even more dangerous than simple summoning. The magic required to bind a demon lord is extraordinarily powerful and difficult to maintain. Even while bound, Demogorgon's words and presence work to undermine the binding, corrupting both the magic and the mages maintaining it. His two heads speak separately to different members of the binding circle, sowing dissension and doubt. He offers tempting deals designed to convince just one mage to break the circle, which is all he needs to escape. If a binding somehow succeeds, it cannot last indefinitely. The summoners must eventually either dismiss Demogorgon or watch as their binding slowly erodes. He is patient and can wait days, weeks, or even months for an opening. Every moment he remains bound, his influence seeps outward, gradually infecting the area around his prison. Dreams become nightmares, shadows move when they shouldn't, water behaves strangely, and slowly, inexorably, madness spreads. Banishing the Demogorgon once summoned is even more difficult than calling him forth. Powerful divine magic, carefully crafted rituals drawing on celestial power, or the intervention of beings of equivalent power may be required. The symbols and chants for banishment are no less complex than those for summoning, and they must be performed while Demogorgon actively works to prevent the ritual's completion. Some banishments merely send him back to the Abyss, which, while ending the immediate threat, does nothing to prevent future manifestations. True banishments that prevent his return for extended periods require enormous magical power, and often involve sealing the location against demonic influence, essentially creating a permanent ward that requires maintenance for years or centuries afterwards. The most powerful banishments bind Demogorgon to a specific location or object, imprisoning him in the material plane but rendering him unable to act freely. Such prisons require constant maintenance and guards, for Demogorgon never ceases attempting to break free. The fortress of Watcher's Keep in Faerun once contained such a prison, with an entire order of knights dedicated to maintaining the magical seals. Even then, the magic began to fail during the time of troubles, and only heroic intervention prevented his escape. Perhaps most importantly, Demogorgon does not forget those who have summoned or banished him. His memory is perfect, and his patience is infinite. Those who successfully dismiss him find that they have made an eternal enemy. Years or decades later, when they believe themselves safe, his influence may return. They might be visited by his cultists. They might find themselves experiencing increasing mental instability. Their loved ones might begin to act strangely, or they might simply vanish one night, transported to the Gaping Maw to face their master's wrath directly. The few documented successful summonings and bindings serve more as warnings than as instruction manuals. The Archmage Igwilv, one of the most powerful and learned demonologists in history, successfully summoned and bound numerous demon lords in her studies. Her accounts of Demogorgon emphasize his cunning and the extreme danger of attempting to control him, noting that even she, with all her knowledge and power, considered him among the most threatening entities she ever confronted. The ultimate lesson of these attempts is clear. Demogorgon cannot be truly controlled. At best, he can be temporarily contained or convinced to pursue goals that align with the summoner's purposes, but he will always ensure that the outcome ultimately serves him. Those who believe themselves clever enough to use him as a tool invariably discover that they have become his tools instead. The Demogorgon's influence extends far beyond his layer of the Abyss, reaching into countless worlds across the multiverse. His power seeps through cracks in reality, spreads through his cults, and manifests in places where madness and water intersect. No corner of the plains is entirely safe from his attention, though some locations are far more vulnerable than others. Portals to the Gaping Maw sometimes open spontaneously in specific types of locations. Asylums near coastlines are particularly prone to such manifestations, as the combination of mental instability and proximity to water creates ideal conditions for Demogorgon's influence to bleed through. Ships that have been adrift too long, their crews descending into madness from starvation and thirst, may find themselves sailing not through normal seas but into the briny waters of the Gaping Maw. Underwater caverns where ancient evils dwell, deep ocean trenches where sunlight never reaches, and subterranean rivers flowing through forgotten ruins. All these places are potential points of connection. Through these openings, Demogorgon's servants emerge to spread chaos and gather sacrifices. Ixitxachitl swim through portals to hunt in new waters. Hethradiah demons wade ashore to slaughter coastal settlements. Cultists find these portals and use them to travel to the Gaping Maw for pilgrimages, returning with greater power and deeper madness. In some worlds, entire civilizations have fallen to Demogorgon's influence. The most tragic examples are undersea kingdoms, civilizations of merfolk, Sahagin, or other aquatic races that initially seemed immune to the surface dwellers' weaknesses. These kingdoms, confident in their isolation and strength, proved particularly vulnerable when Demogorgon's attention turned to them. The process of corruption is insidious. It might begin with a single curious researcher discovering texts about the Prince of Demons, or an angry priest seeking greater power to defend against enemies might invoke Demogorgon's name. A diplomat desperate to save their city might make a foolish bargain. However it starts, the infection spreads. First come the dreams, visions of dual-headed figures offering power, whispering secrets about enemies, promising solutions to problems. Then the mutations begin to appear, minor at first, easy to dismiss as natural variation or disease. A few individuals develop strange growths or extra limbs. Animals behave oddly. The water itself seems wrong somehow, tasting different, moving in unusual patterns. By the time the rulers realize what is happening, it's often too late. The cultists are too numerous, too well placed in positions of power. The mutations have spread too far. The fabric of society itself has been corrupted, with citizens unable to trust their own perceptions or judge whether their neighbors are still themselves. Insanity becomes normalized. Violence is no longer shocking. The values and traditions that held the civilization together dissolve in the face of Demogorgon's corrupting influence. What remains is a twisted parody of what once was, a kingdom whose citizens wear the forms and follow the routines of their former lives but serve Demogorgon utterly. These corrupted civilizations become staging grounds for his influence to spread further, launching raids against neighboring kingdoms, establishing new cult cells in distant lands, and serving as beachheads for demonic invasion. Coastal cities above water are not immune. Port cities with large criminal underworlds provide fertile ground for cults to form in secret. The madness spreads through the poorest quarters first, the docks, the slums, the places where desperation make people receptive to promises of power. By the time the authorities notice, the cult has usually grown beyond the ability of normal law enforcement to suppress. The signs of Demogorgon's influence in a city are subtle at first. An increase in drownings, particularly in cases where the victims seem to have deliberately walked into the water. Reports of strange sounds coming from the sewers or storm drains. Missing persons, especially those who lived near water or had been acting strangely before their disappearance. Graffiti in languages no one recognizes, symbols that hurt to look at directly, messages written in places no one should have been able to reach. As the influence grows stronger, the signs become more blatant. Mass hallucinations affect entire neighborhoods. Animals flee the city or attack in coordinated swarms. The very stones of buildings seem to shift and change overnight. Doorways appearing where none existed before. Windows looking out on impossible vistas. Eventually, if not stopped, the city undergoes a transformation similar to the undersea kingdoms, its population corrupted, its geography warped, becoming essentially an extension of the Gaping Maw manifested in the material plane. Even landlocked regions are not entirely safe. Demogorgon's cults can create the conditions necessary for his power to manifest through elaborate rituals. They might dig chambers deep underground to reach subterranean seas or aquifers. They might construct vast cisterns and fill them with water mixed with blood and other substances. They might redirect rivers to flow through the temples built in imitation of Abysm's architecture. The psychological aspect of Demogorgon's influence is perhaps even more insidious than the physical manifestations. His power does not simply drive people mad in a general sense, it fractures their sense of self, creating divisions in their consciousness similar to their own dual nature. victims begin to experience conflicting thoughts and impulses, feeling as though they're at war with themselves. They might wake with no memory of what they did the previous night. They might discover evidence of actions they don't remember taking, letters written in their own hand containing thoughts they don't recall having, belongings moved or destroyed, even crimes committed with no recollection of the events. This fragmentation can spread through a population like disease. Family members turn on each other, unsure whether the person they're speaking to is really themselves or has been replaced by something wearing their face. Trust becomes impossible. Society's basic functions break down as people cannot rely on their own perceptions or the consistency of others' behaviors. Heroes who have faced Demogorgon's servants and survived speak of the difficulty of such conflicts. Combat is only part of the challenge. The greater struggle is maintaining one's own sanity and sense of self while fighting enemies who can warp perception, implant false memories, and erode the boundary between reality and delusion. Many who have defeated his cultists or banished his avatars find that victory comes at a terrible cost. Their sanity permanently damaged, their faith in reality forever shaken, their relationships destroyed by what they experienced. Some survivors become obsessed with combating Demogorgon's influence, dedicating their lives to hunting his cultists and closing portals to the Gaping Maw. Others become paranoid and withdrawn, unable to trust anyone fully, seeing signs of his influence everywhere. A few unfortunate souls become unintentional spreaders of his corruption, their damaged minds serving as conduits for his influence even as they believe themselves to be fighting against him. The planes beyond the material plane are not immune either. Demogorgon has launched invasions into other layers of the Abyss, attempting to expand his territory. He once invaded the Olympian glades of Arborea, a celestial realm of beauty and joy, seeking to corrupt it. Though that invasion was eventually repelled, it demonstrates his ambition and his willingness to attack even the upper planes if he sees advantage in doing so. The broader cosmic implications of Demogorgon's expanding influence concern scholars and planar travelers. If the Prince of Demons were to grow significantly stronger, if more worlds fell to his corruption, if the barriers between planes weakened enough for him to manifest freely, the consequences could reshape entire regions of the multiverse. Some prophecies speak of such an event as a precursor to the end of the current cosmic order. Though whether these prophecies are genuine visions or simply the fearful imaginings of those who have glimpsed his power remains debatable. What hope is there for those who must face the Demogorgon or his servants? The honest answer is precious little if the legends and historical accounts are to be believed. Yet hope is not entirely absent, for the Prince of Demons has been opposed before, and some who stood against him have survived to tell the tale. The first and most crucial defense is mental fortification. Protection against madness must be established before any engagement with Demogorgon's forces. This can take many forms: spells of mental protection, enchanted items that shield the mind, holy symbols blessed by gods of reason and order, meditation techniques that strengthen mental discipline, or simply the strength of will to reject the whispers that assault consciousness. Divine magic proves particularly effective, especially magic channeled through deities opposed to madness and chaos. Gods of knowledge, order, healing, and truth can grant protections that blunt Demogorgon's ability to fracture minds. Paladins and clerics devoted to such deities have successfully faced his servants by maintaining constant prayer and calling upon their patron's power to shield themselves and their allies. Understanding the dual nature of Demogorgon himself provides strategic opportunities for those who must face him directly. The conflict between Aameul and Hethradiah can be exploited by clever opponents. Strategies that play the two heads against each other, proposals that appeal to one but not the other, attacks that force them to disagree on response, can induce indecision that creates openings for escape or counterattack. Some legendary victories against Demogorgon involved heroes who managed to provoke such intense conflict between the heads that he essentially paralyzed himself temporarily. Water, while often associated with Demogorgon's power, can be both weakness and strength for those facing his servants. In aquatic environments, his power is strongest, and fighting there places mortals at severe disadvantage. However, those who can control or manipulate water, Powerful druids, clerics of sea deities, or mages specializing in such magic may be able to disrupt his influence by imposing their own will on the element. Removing water from an area where his servants operate can weaken them, while purifying corrupted waters can help break his hold on a location. Fire has proven effective in some encounters, though not reliably so. As the antithesis of water, it represents opposition to one of Demogorgon's primary elements. More importantly, fire can destroy the physical forms of his servants and burn away corrupting influence before it spreads. Temples that have successfully defended against his cults often maintain sacred flames and must never be extinguished, believing, sometimes correctly, that these flames help prevent demonic manifestation. Knowledge is perhaps the most important weapon. Those who understand the nature of Demogorgon's power, who recognize the signs of its influence early, who can identify his servants before they strike, who know the proper rituals to ward against his attention, have the best chance of survival. Studying the accounts of previous encounters, maintaining records of cult activities, and sharing information among those who oppose him creates a collective defense that makes his schemes more difficult to execute. Recognizing the symbols his cultists use is crucial for early intervention. The forked tail wrapped around skull or swords, the dual-headed figures in graffiti or art, certain arrangements of rocks or bones that form his sigils. All these serve as warnings. Areas where these symbols appear frequently are likely to be sites of cult activity or places where his influence is growing strong. Understanding the tactics of his servants provides further advantage. Ixitxachitl prefer ambush tactics, attacking from below or from murky water where they cannot be seen. Cultists often work to isolate targets, separating strong-willed individuals from groups and attacking when victims are alone and vulnerable. Recognizing these patterns allow for appropriate countermeasures, traveling in groups, maintaining clear lines of sight, avoiding areas where ambush is possible. Alliances prove crucial when facing threats of this magnitude. No single individual, regardless of power, should attempt to face Demogorgon alone. Groups of heroes working together, combining different abilities and areas of expertise, stand far better chances than solo adventurers. Moreover, alliances with divine beings, powerful wizards guilds, or even other demon lords opposed to Demogorgon can provide resources and support that make victory possible. Some have survived encounters by avoiding direct confrontation entirely. Sometimes the wisest course is simply to flee, to place as much distance as possible between oneself and Demogorgon's influence. There is no shame in this. Preserving one's life and sanity to fight another day in better circumstances shows wisdom rather than cowardice. Those who survive to warn others and help prepare better defenses serve their cause more effectively than those who throw their lives away in futile heroics. For those facing his cults rather than Demogorgon himself, disrupting their activities before they can complete major rituals is essential. Most significant manifestations of Demogorgon's power require extensive preparation, gathering sacrifices, constructing appropriate facilities, performing lengthy ceremonies. Interrupting these preparations, destroying cult infrastructure, and rescuing intended victims can prevent disasters before they occur. Magical items and artifacts provide powerful assistance. Weapons blessed by good deities, armor enchanted against mental influence, rings of mind shielding. All of these and many other items can make the difference between success and failure. Some legendary artifacts specifically created to combat demonic influence prove especially valuable, though such items are rare and often come with their own dangers or costs. Mental discipline and self-awareness become crucial when operating in areas affected by Demogorgon's influence. Those who understand their own minds well enough to recognize when thoughts or impulses are not truly their own stand better chances of resisting corruption. Regular mental exercises, meditation, keeping journals to track one's own thoughts and actions. These practices help maintain clarity and detect early signs of influence. Environmental awareness matters as well. Recognizing when an area has been corrupted, when the water tastes wrong, when shadows move incorrectly, when sounds echo strangely, allows for appropriate caution. Some locations are simply too dangerous to enter without overwhelming force or divine protection, and recognizing this before committing to engagement can save lives. Perhaps most importantly, those who oppose Demogorgon must accept that they will likely be changed by the experience. Even successful opposition often comes at cost. Nightmares, moments of irrational fear, difficulty trusting one's own perceptions. Acknowledging these costs and preparing for them, establishing support networks or others who understand what such experiences do to people, can help survivors cope with the aftermath. The greatest defense against the Prince of Demons is ultimately prevention, ensuring he never draws his attention to oneself in the first place, not seeking forbidden knowledge that invokes his interest, not traveling to places where his influence is strong without compelling reason, not speaking his true name aloud, and most importantly, never attempting to summon or bargain with him. Those who avoid becoming targets in the first place face infinitely better odds than those who must actively oppose him. For those that have no choice but to stand against him because their homes are threatened, because their loved ones have been corrupted, because the duty falls to them, courage coupled with caution offers the best path forward. Honor the danger, respect the enemy's power, prepare thoroughly, work with allies, and never underestimate the Prince of Demons. Those who have survived to become legends understood these principles and lived by them. The Demogorgon's terrifying legacy extended beyond the tabletop when it became a central monster in the hit Netflix series Stranger Things. The show's first season, which premiered in 2016, introduced a mainstream audience of millions to this iconic D&D creature, though in a dramatically reimagined form. In the series, the Demogorgon served as the primary antagonist stalking the small town of Hawkins, Indiana. The show's creators drew direct inspiration from the D&D creature that the main characters, a group of young friends who regularly play Dungeons & Dragons, use as their reference point for understanding the monster hunting their town. This metatextual approach proved brilliant as it allowed the characters to draw upon their gaming knowledge to make sense of an impossible situation, while simultaneously introducing viewers unfamiliar with D&D to one of its most iconic monsters. The Stranger Things version differs significantly from its tabletop inspiration. Rather than the 18-foot-tall, two-headed demon lord with tentacles for arms, the show's Demogorgon appears as a more animalistic predator, a humanoid creature with an elongated head that opens like a grotesque flower, revealing concentric rings of teeth. It lacks the twin heads and tentacles of the original, instead possessing long clawed limbs and a generally more bestial appearance. Despite these visual differences, the show's Demogorgon captured essential elements that make the D&D creatures so terrifying. It's a relentless predator from an alternate dimension, the Upside Down, which shares conceptual similarities with the Abyss. Hunting through portals between worlds just as the D&D Demogorgon's servants emerging through rifts in reality. It spreads fear and corruption wherever it appears, its presence associated with decay and wrongness. The character's attempts to understand and fight it using D&D knowledge as a framework created compelling drama that resonated with both gamers and general audiences. The show's approach to naming the creature proved particularly clever. The young protagonist, faced with an unnamed horror, dubbed it the Demogorgon, based on their current D&D campaign, using their game as a lens to process and communicate about the very real danger they faced. This naming wasn't meant to suggest the creature was literally the Demon Lord from D&D lore, but rather that it was similar enough, terrifying, powerful, from another dimension, that the name fit. The crossover between D&D lore and popular culture proved immensely successful. Stranger Things drove renewed interest in Dungeons & Dragons, with the game experiencing a surge in popularity that coincided with the show's release. New players drawn to D&D by the show often sought information about the real Demogorgon, discovering the rich lore that had existed for decades in gaming materials. For longtime D&D players, the show's use of the Demogorgon represented a mainstream acknowledgement of a creature they'd known and feared for years. The Demogorgon, already legendary among gamers, became a household name, appearing in countless discussions online and in popular media. Wizards of the Coast, the company that produces D&D, saw this cultural moment as an opportunity to introduce new audiences to the depth and complexity of their game's lore. Interestingly, the timing of Stranger Things and the release of D&D's Out of the Abyss adventure module, which featured the Demogorgon prominently, was largely coincidental. Out of the Abyss was published in September 2015, and the show premiered in July 2016. The confluence of these releases meant that the Demogorgon was experiencing a surge in visibility from both directions simultaneously. The show's success demonstrated the enduring power of well-crafted horror and the ability of classic monsters to evolve and find new life in different media. While the Stranger Things Demogorgon and the D&D Demogorgon are quite different in appearance and nature, both tap into primal fears, the terror of encountering something powerful, incomprehensible, and utterly hostile to human existence. For the broader D&D community, the show's popularity represented validation of sorts. Concepts and creatures that had existed in gaming circles for decades were suddenly part of mainstream conversation. Parents who had once dismissed D&D as strange or concerning found themselves watching their children's hobby represented positively in popular media. The Demogorgon, as both a D&D icon and a pop culture phenomenon, served as a bridge between these worlds. The show also sparked discussions about adaptation and interpretation. How much can you change a creature while still calling it by the same name? What elements are essential to a monster's identity, and what can be altered for different storytelling needs? These conversations enriched both the D&D community and the show's fandom, creating dialogue between different types of creative expression. Subsequent seasons of Stranger Things continued to draw on D&D concepts, introducing other monsters and threats from the game's lore, though often significantly reimagined. Each new season reinforced the connection between the show and the game, maintaining and building upon the cultural crossover that the Demogorgon initiated. The Demogorgon's dual existence as both the ancient two-headed prince of demons in D&D lore and as the predatory creature from the Upside Down in Stranger Things demonstrates how powerful concepts can transcend their own medium. The name Demogorgon now carries meaning in multiple contexts, recognized by both gamers who face the demon lord across gaming tables and viewers who watch the Hawkins kids fight for survival against an otherworldly threat. The cultural moment also highlighted the broader influence of D&D on popular fiction. The game has served as a creative inspiration for countless authors, game designers, and filmmakers over its nearly 50-year history. Stranger Things made this influence explicit and celebrated it, showing how the collaborative storytelling and imaginative world-building of tabletop gaming can inspire compelling narratives in other media. For those interested in exploring the real Demogorgon after encountering the Stranger Things version, the contrast proves illuminating. The D&D creature is not merely a monster, but a cosmic force, an ancient and intelligent being whose influence shapes entire worlds. Understanding the full depth of the character, the dual heads with their conflicting personalities, the legendary power, the complex history spanning eons, reveals layers of storytelling potential that a single season of television could never fully capture. The Demogorgon's journey from obscure demon in 1970s gaming supplements to mainstream pop cultural icon represents one of the more remarkable evolutions in fantasy media. Whether encountered in the original form across a gaming table or its reimagined form on a television screen, the Demogorgon continues to terrify and fascinate, proving that truly great horror monsters can adapt and thrive across generations and media. The Demogorgon endures as a threat across countless worlds and countless ages because he represents something inescapable. The fragility of sanity, the thin line between reason and madness, the terrifying truth that our perception of reality is far more tenuous than we dare to believe. He is the nightmare lurking in deep water, the whisper that comes in the night, the creeping fear that perhaps we are not as sane or as whole as we think. His persistence stems from multiple factors working in concert. First, his sheer power makes him nearly impossible to permanently destroy. Even if his physical form were somehow annihilated, a feat that would require multiple gods or demon lords working together, his essence would reconstitute in the Abyss given time. As possibly the first Tenari and certainly one of the most ancient beings in the demonic hierarchy, he is woven into the very fabric of the Abyss itself. Second, his dual nature paradoxically strengthens him even as it creates internal conflict. While Aameul and Hethradiah war with each other, together they form an entity more versatile and adaptable than any single consciousness could be. When confronted with challenges, Demogorgon can simultaneously pursue contradictory strategies, ensuring that if one approach fails, another might succeed. This makes him extraordinarily difficult to predict or counter, as he's literally of two minds about most situations. Third, his influence operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Even when his physical manifestations are defeated, his ideological and psychological influence persists. The madness he spreads can lie dormant for generations, hidden in bloodlines or sleeping in cursed locations, only to emerge when conditions allow. Cults that are destroyed may seem eradicated, but survivors carry the seed of his corruption to new locations, eventually establishing new cells. Fourth, his patient nature ensures his survival. Unlike demon lords whose impulsive actions lead to their downfall, Demogorgon, or at least Aameul, thinks in terms of centuries and millennia. He can afford to lose battles, even significant ones, because he understands that he has literally infinite time to pursue his goals. This patience makes him more dangerous, not less, as he's willing to set schemes in motion that will not bear fruit for generations. In every age, in every world where mortal consciousness exists, there will be those who fall to madness. Mental illness, trauma, despair, rage. All these create vulnerabilities that Demogorgon can exploit. There will always be those who look into the abyss and find the Demogorgon looking back. There will always be cults that form in his name, sacrifices made to earn his favor, portals open to bring his power into new realms. The democratic and chaotic nature of the abyss means that Demogorgon's title as Prince of Demons will forever be contested. Orcus will continue scheming to overthrow him. Gratz will continue plotting. Abyssal will never cease attempting to reclaim what he believes is rightfully his. Yet Demogorgon has held his position through eons of such challenges, suggesting that whatever his weaknesses, they are not sufficient to overcome his strengths. From a cosmic perspective, Demogorgon serves a role in the universal balance whether he intends to or not. His existence provides a force of chaos that opposes the tyranny of absolute order. His madness challenges complacency and forces growth through adversity. This is not to suggest he is in any way good or beneficial. He is purely evil by any reasonable moral framework, but rather that his existence is entangled with the fundamental structure of the multiverse in ways that make his complete elimination perhaps impossible and potentially dangerous in ways that are difficult to predict. For mortal civilizations across the planes, Demogorgon represents one of the great existential threats, a being whose very existence challenges the foundations upon which society is built. Law, reason, sanity, trust, all the things that allow civilization to function are anathema to him. He will always work to undermine these pillars, to spread madness and chaos, to drag the ordered world down into the depths where he reigns supreme. Yet this very nature makes him one of the greatest challenges that heroes can face. To stand against the Demogorgon is to stand against the fundamental chaos of the universe, to assert that sanity and order can triumph over madness and dissolution. It is to claim that consciousness can remain coherent in the face of forces designed to fragment it, that reason can prevail against unreason, that reality itself can be trusted despite his efforts to prove otherwise. Those few who have faced him directly and survived become legends precisely because of the magnitude of what they've achieved. They've looked into the eyes of madness incarnate and refused to blink. They have withstood assaults that would shatter ordinary minds. They have navigated labyrinths designed to trap and confuse. They have resisted temptations and corruptions that have destroyed stronger souls. And they have done all this knowing that even victory is temporary, that Demogorgon endures, that the threat will rise again. These heroes serve as proof, fragile but real, that evil, no matter how ancient or powerful, can be opposed. Their stories inspire others to stand firm when faced with despair, to maintain sanity when madness beckons, to fight on when surrender seems the only rational choice. In this way, opposition to Demogorgon becomes not just a physical struggle, but a spiritual and philosophical one, a declaration that meaning exists even in a universe that contains such horrors. The Prince of Demons remains in the dark places of the world and the cosmos beyond, eternal and patient. His whispers echo in the depths. His servants plot and scheme across 1,000 worlds. His madness seeps through cracks in reality, corrupting the unwary and the desperate. And somewhere in the spiraling depths of the abyssal realm, Demogorgon dreams his terrible dreams, his two heads forever arguing, forever united, forever hungry for new worlds to corrupt and new minds to shatter. This is the nature of the Demogorgon, eternal, terrible, and utterly beyond redemption. To know of him is to know fear. To face him is to risk everything, and to defeat him, even temporarily, is to achieve something that echoes across the plains as proof that light can push back darkness, that sanity can withstand madness, that heroes can triumph even against impossible odds. The stories of Demogorgon serve as both warning and challenge. They warn of the dangers of forbidden knowledge, of the price of desperation, of the corruption that lurks in the depths. But they also challenge those who hear them to be stronger, wiser, more vigilant. They remind us that evil exists, that threats are real, and that the only thing preventing darkness from overwhelming the light is the willingness of good beings to stand firm against it. And so the Prince of Demons endures, as he always has and always will, a permanent fixture in the cosmic order of things. But so too do those who oppose him endure. Generation after generation, each new crop of heroes learning from those who came before, adding their own chapters to the eternal struggle. The war between Demogorgon and those who would limit his influence has no end, for neither side can achieve total victory. But in that endless conflict, in the daily choices to resist madness and maintain sanity, in the courage to face fear rather than surrender to it, lies meaning and purpose that transcends the struggle itself. This, perhaps, is the ultimate lesson of the Demogorgon, that the fight against chaos and madness is not one that can be won once and for all, but rather a battle that must be fought continuously by each person and each generation. The Prince of Demons will always be there, in the shadows, in the depths, in the corners of troubled minds. But so too will there always be those who refuse to submit, who maintain their grip on sanity, who push back against the darkness. And in the eternal struggle, we define what it means to be civilized, to be conscious, to be human.